We are 22S Radio. 22S Radio is 22smedia.com and 88.1 FM, KKJZ HD3, Long Beach, Los Angeles.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, and now, our World Broadcasting Tag Team Champions of the World and our Cruiserweight Champion.
I'm Ethan.
I'm James.
I'm Rob.
And this is episode 142 of Beyond the Ropes. We are BTR Pro Wrestling Talk. Of course, we are here recording safely at home via Zoom. I hope everyone's staying safe. And of course, you can follow the show on Twitter at RealBTRRadio, Facebook, facebook.com/Beyond the Ropes. And of course, YouTube, just search up Beyond the Ropes and you will find over 140 episodes currently uploaded there. You can follow me individually on Twitter at EthanIV95. You can follow James at
JHW Reporter.
And you can follow Rob at
Rob Flores Media. Don't forget the R-Truth DMs for Ethan.
Oh, Lord. Speaking of R-Truth, I finally saw him for the first time in like a month. He's on Raw Talk, but he's not defending that title. I don't see anyone chasing him. Look at that. Paper champ.
Yeah, that's right.
Come on now.
Yeah, I forgot about that. He's like the host in that. I forgot about that.
He's on Raw Talk, but he's not defending the title. So, anyways.
I mean, he's right there if anybody wants him.
Apparently, everyone in the 24/7 division just stopped caring about the title. They figured it's probably a hassle. Probably too much work trying to chase after him all the time. Figured let's just move on. So, all right. Let's talk about something a little more serious, maybe something though that's been catching the world of professional wrestling over the last couple of weeks. Of course, I'm talking about the Dark Side of the Ring series, which is on Vice TV, also on Vice. It's currently on Vice's YouTube channel. They uploaded it for free, which is nice of them. It is a 2-part season premiere. Of course, this is season 3. A show that's featured the likes of Randy Macho Man Savage, which we'll talk about later in this episode. Talked about the Montreal Screwjob. Talked about the Benoit incident, Owen Hart, etc., the Brawl for All that stuff. But of course, the season premiere focused on the late Brian Pillman, known to many as the loose cannon Brian Pillman, and we got to see that shown on Dark Side of the Ring, and we all saw it, correct?
I did see it for sure. I don't know if Rob did,
Rob,
but I know I did.
Oh, you caught it. Good. I'm glad you saw it. So, I mean, let's talk about just an overall before we get into maybe details. We don't have to go necessarily in chronological order, but we can just talk about our overall thoughts on the episode before we get into specific details of certain things. What did you guys think of this episode?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think they missed a good opportunity to talk about the Hart family. First and foremost, no.
I'm surprised it didn't mention that.
No. But it was. I did find that interesting though, because for me, I didn't know a whole lot about Brian Pillman growing up. I didn't know about the ECW run. I didn't know about the Hollywood Blonde and WCW. We'll talk a little bit more about that stuff later. But what I remember Brian Pillman for was the stuff he did on Raw and with WWE. I remember obviously that that segment with the gun and with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Obviously, I remember what I was doing that night, that day when I saw that live on TV. But other than that, a lot of the other stuff was like the Hart Foundation stuff. He might have been in the Canadian Stampede match, that big family match. I think he was in that. But they didn't mention any of that, which is fine, which is cool. I mean, it obviously, I feel, didn't really take away from the documentary, and considering it was already 2 episodes as it was. But I don't know. I just felt like there could have been something there, especially for the different struggles and stuff that Pillman was going through, especially during his time in WWE. You know, how impactful was, you know, Bret Hart and some of them during that time. I know when it was announced that Pillman was dead, I don't remember Pillman's wife's name, but I know she wanted to talk to Owen, Melanie. That's right. What did I say? I forgot. I said Martha. Okay, Martha.
That's a heart.
So Melanie, she said she wanted to talk to Owen. I think that's when she first found out, about Pillman. That's the name, the wrestler she was probably most familiar with within the organization or trusted. So yeah, I mean, other than that Owen reference, there wasn't much about the Hart family. Obviously Bret Hart is the only one alive at this time from that time period of the Hart Foundation. So maybe they did reach out to Bret. I don't know. But other than that, I thought it was great overall. I learned a lot about Brian Pillman and his contributions to wrestling. And it's just kind of weird that, I wasn't really always aware of what the drug situation was for him or how it started. And it just kind of it all just seemed to start with that car accident that seems like it could have just been avoided. But that, like they say several times, and Stone Cold said himself, that was really or I think Brian Pillman Jr. was the one who said it. That was kind of the beginning of the end, or that's when you kind of can mark hey, this was the beginning of the end for Brian Pillman. So
absolutely. So yes, I mean, we'll go through his, I guess we'll mention his story, I guess. But it did focus a lot on the family. And I mean,
yeah,
the aftermath of, his passing. I know, Rob, you mentioned all his surgeries of him growing up. He had to have a lot of surgeries because he kept getting polyps in his throat that they had to do over 40 surgeries, I believe. His sister said, and they had to do an emergency one finally at the doctor's house, which is insane because it was gonna close up his throat. So it explains why he had the raspy voice in his life. But then he went on to college and then tried to, I guess he tried out for the Cincinnati Bengals.
For the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm trying to remember if he was actually on the team or not. I don't think he got drafted though, but he was on the team for some period of time. And
then he got an ankle injury. But then he basically picked up a mentor in his life. I forgot what the guy's name is.
Kim Wood, I think.
Kim Wood, yes. Who is a character in himself. Apparently, he was his life coach, it seems like. I mean, every decision he made, it was, at least in the wrestling business, was
which
built around Kim.
It was weird though, because I had never really heard of this guy before. I had he didn't seem like he was some wrestling, he was just a football, I think he was a strength and conditioning coach.
Right. And he's the one that told him to go to Stampede Wrestling and be trained by the Hart family.
But he didn't, but even the way that because I think Kim Wood explains that in the story, but I don't even think he made it out like he knows them or he had an in with the Hart family. It was just kind of hey, you're in Toronto or whatever, or I hear this family's, the place to go if you want to learn wrestling, you should go there. It wasn't really so much that he had an in, which is why I just found it interesting with the stuff later on. He was kind of talking about, oh, let's do this with your gimmick or that, or screw Bischoff. And I'm just wait, what? I don't know. It was just weird, but it was kind of interesting. It was just kind of two outs. And well, I guess Brian Pillman after a while was on the inside, but yeah, like you said, not really life coach, but in a way, he was more his mentor and kind of the one steering the ship in a way. Not that puts any blame on him for what happened with Pillman, but it was just an interesting dynamic that I had never heard of before. So I thought it was kind of good that they were able to get him. I think that's what made this story interesting, and at least something better for me from what I'd already heard, Austin or anybody else say on their podcast and different stuff. So I thought it was kind of neat.
What was interesting to me is also as they get into it, everyone's favorite wrestling journalist, Dave Meltzer, was there. And apparently he had a good relationship with Pillman because they would actually talk back and forth, and they would trade tapes essentially, and that's what helped Pillman get signed to WCW, was because of Meltzer basically praising Pillman in the 80s, and so he eventually got signed to WCW. So that was interesting how he kind of played that, and he even used Meltzer throughout his career as well to kind of like, you know, build his resume and build his name up. So that was interesting.
Was this maybe one of the first ones where they've actually had Meltzer in it? Because I'm sure they could have had Meltzer in a handful of these documentaries.
Been in a couple, I want to say.
You think so?
Yeah, not many, but he'd been in a couple. I want to.
If anything, he would probably probably popped up a lot more in this one. He might have been in the Owen one, maybe.
Yeah, he was more of a focal point as a talking head here for sure. So I mean, let's quickly mention some of the talking heads. Steve Austin was, of course, one of them. Probably the biggest name, of course, because he teamed with Brian, which we'll get to right now.
Right.
Dave Meltzer, of course, we mentioned. Bischoff was there briefly. His wife was in a different one, I believe.
What do you mean? Say it again.
No, it was Bischoff, and then I was thinking about the Macho Man one. Sorry, because Bischoff was in this one, but Bischoff's wife was in the Macho Man bio, which is a different one. Let's see who else we have. I'm blanking on people here. Oh, Kim Wood, of course, and Brian's family. His wife Melanie, and his 3 children. And of course, Brian Pillman Jr., who's obviously more of the focal point here as well. But yeah, so we had people obviously throughout his life, and he gets to WCW, and it seems like every time he was getting a push, there was someone new in management, and he would have to start from the bottom. That was kind of the story going in. Finally, they paired him with Steve Austin, who Austin wasn't happy about because he was in line to get that. It was either a TV title or US title push. So
he was supposed to get a US title push with Harley Race as his manager. I've heard this story like a million times already.
Yeah.
Talking about it every chance he can get.
Well, he's probably so bitter. He's like, damn, could have had that moment. But
I mean, it worked out. I mean,
it worked out. They became the Hollywood Blondes, and they went out to be a very successful tag team. I believe they were tag team champions. What ended up costing or them splitting, I believe, was the fact that they main evented a show. I don't know if it was a pay-per-view. It was with Flair and someone else, and I forget.
I don't even think they really even said who the other name was, but yeah, then I guess it went to ratings, and they were going to blame. Yeah, they didn't want
Flair, so they blamed, of course, those two, and they kind of just fell off as the Hollywood Blondes, unfortunately.
But it was just interesting though, because like Flair, I think it was like Flair wanted to work with those guys, or he wanted to work with Pillman. I think obviously Pillman later on or at some point ends up in the Horsemen or something, but it's kind of like, that's why the rating stuff for wrestling always kind of confuses me, and how they say, oh, these guys are in the main event, so they're the biggest draw. Like, is that necessarily true? Like, we'll talk about Jinder Mahal later, but Jinder Mahal was a champion, and other than the Crown Jewel stuff or whatever they did there, would you say that people were lining up at the door to go see Jinder Mahal main event? No, I don't think so. So I always found that weird. Maybe they know something I don't, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to pin it on. I would think it'd be kind of hard to pin it on the Hollywood Blondes at that time. From a lot of the clips and the different things, it seemed like they're over, but yeah, they kept getting these stop and starts. I don't know. Did they actually ever say who the booker was at that time, or as Pillman would say, who the booker man was?
I don't remember who it was. It could have been Dusty. It could have been. I don't think Bischoff.
It might have been Ole
running. It could have been Ole.
It wasn't Bischoff at that time. This was like way back in the day. This was probably like Ole or Dusty.
So, but yeah, I mean, they said they kept switching out people in management, so it doesn't really matter at this point. So basically, they had that, and then they goes into Pillman's personal life. He came off very much as a family man, and that it's good or bad because obviously there's a lot of bad here. Um, he married his first wife, Rochelle, and they had their first child, Brittany, who was obviously featured here. And then he discovered he had already had a daughter from a previous relationship that he didn't even know of, who was already 1 year old. Danny, I believe Danielle was her name, but she went by Danny in this interview here. And so, let's see. Basically,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just think the family, like that whole family situation was not complicated, but it did get kind of complicated. There was some tea in that one for sure. Like I didn't know it was that crazy. I'll let you finish laying it out actually before.
Yeah, we're gonna lay it out here. Yeah, because I didn't know a lot of this stuff actually. I didn't really know.
I didn't know a lot of it either. I was like, whoa.
So Pillman, he's life. They kind of explain it as life on the road. He's basically enjoying the luxuries of life, and he decides he wants someone else. I believe he finds his second wife, Melanie, on the cover of a magazine or something.
Right.
And I found this out too, listening to Jim Cornette's podcast as they were reviewing this episode. Melanie was actually in a relationship with the Ultimate Warrior beforehand.
Wow.
Yeah. Apparently,
before Pillman?
Before Pillman, and Pillman didn't know about it until later on, which I don't think he really cared about. But apparently, yeah, Melanie and Warrior were in a relationship together beforehand. So she kind of about the wrestling business, where Melanie basically said her daughter would be better off without her or something like that. Or
yeah, so
right?
So what happened was Melanie said, or I think the daughter said that Melanie told Pillman's first wife that
Rochelle.
Her own mother doesn't believe that Rochelle's mother doesn't believe Rochelle's as good of a mother as Melanie was,
right?
Which is cold, and that's some cold, like that's cold-hearted right there. So yeah,
That's
she interpreted it very kindly.
It's terrible to say the least. Rochelle then went to call, I believe, her mother and tell her what she was going to, or she asked her about that and then told her that what she was going to do. And then she shot herself, and I believe she was taken to a hospital. And did she die on the helicopter or was it at the hospital? I forget which one because I've been my episodes mixed up.
Yeah, it was either one. It was like either one. I think she died on the way there. But yeah, unfortunately, it was Brian Pillman's sister who was caught in the middle of all this and had to be the one to go down to the hospital and kind of get that official news, and then therefore pass it on to that side of the family and to Pillman and all that.
She passed it on to Rochelle's mom.
Right.
She was the one that told her mom, and as well as the Pillmans. And Brian was devastated, of course. He felt guilty with the situation. And I think Melanie felt guilty as well, which she definitely pushed her to a certain
right.
point.
So Melanie, she regrets it now, and it's horrible. It's kind of like even with Pillman, I'm like, oh, now you feel bad, but sometimes, you don't really know things are gonna go that far. That doesn't mean it makes it okay.
Well, but I will say it was mentioned. Brittany will say herself that her mom had problems as well.
Right.
So
it wasn't a direct right. For whatever what is already going on, this obviously didn't add to it or make things any better. But I think not to jump too far ahead, but is it safe to say that this might have been, if it wasn't already? Well, no, I would say was this the cause of Pillman's drug use? But I don't even think that it was this, right?
No, it wasn't. And
Yeah,
we'll get to
which
that.
is kind of tough as it is. I mean, so
So, I mean, before,
I was gonna say, never mind.
it's
Say
wild.
no wonder why she crazy. No wonder why she crazy.
She's out there. We'll get to how crazy she was. Apparently, she already had 2 kids of her own, which were not mentioned by name or featured in this documentary. So Pillman had a total of
Yeah, I
5.
didn't know that.
They had a total of 5 kids and living in the house with Melanie and him. Of course, I guess
Did
they didn't
they?
mention it. Yeah, they had 5 kids. She had 2 of her own. Again, no mention. That's kind of something I would have been more interested in as well. Like what was going on with them? Because as we later found
Yeah.
out, after Pillman's passing, life kind of got hard for Pillman's 3 kids. I don't know what happened.
Right. That's what I'm
to the
saying. I
two.
was like, so where? Right. So where did like the other two kind of? Yeah, that's interesting.
It's untold, I guess. We'll probably never know. But uh, so let's see. Brian Pillman, Rochelle goes missing at one point. Brian and Melanie go for sole custody of Brittany. Um, and Rochelle, I mean, it got to the point where Rochelle couldn't go see her child, her daughter Brittany. She could go visit her. She went for a hug, they explained, and they thought that she was kidnapping her. And of course, Melanie was the one kind of behind Pillman. And we'll get into more details. But when we return, we're going to talk more about this whole Pillman situation right here on Beyond the Ropes. We are 22S Radio. 22S Radio is 22smedia.com and 88.1 FM KKJZ HD3 Long Beach, Los Angeles. Welcome back to episode 142 of Beyond the Ropes. Of course, I'm your host, Ethan, joined alongside the analyst, James Williams, and of course, producer, Rob Flores. We are available on Twitter at RealBTR Radio. You can follow me individually on Twitter at EthanM85. You can follow James at
JHW Reporter.
You can follow Rob at
Rob Flores Media.
And as always, Facebook.com/Beyond the Ropes. Of course, YouTube to search up Beyond the Ropes, and you'll find multiple episodes there. Of course, we're doing this remotely, safely in our houses. Of course, Rob looks like he's in some sort of studio there, but I don't know. We'll just pretend he's not there. I'm currently in a hidden location behind or in front of a banner here, but we'll talk about that in a little bit because there was some big news to come earlier this week. But of course, we were talking about the Brian Pillman episode of The Dark Side of the Ring. We were just getting into the episode or the moment where we were talking about his children and his wife. Basically, they were fighting for custody. They got sole custody of Brittany, which was his second daughter, his middle child. And Brittany's mother, Rochelle, I believe there was a phone call with Melanie. Before we move on quickly, we'll just wrap this part of this episode up here. Brittany does, she basically said, she kind of blames Melanie for her mom not being around. So, that's how it goes. She still does not have a relationship with her, and nor does she want her, in her life. She called her the devil. And she literally called her the devil. So there's that. So moving on from.
It's just so crazy that like, I would assume they're all gonna go back and maybe watch this documentary. So it's kind of like, if she never called her the devil before to her face, she will when she watches this episode.
There you go.
That's crazy.
Next up, we have Pillman pouring himself more into work. He tried to get more money out of Bischoff because obviously they had mentioned throughout kind of this episode with that he needed to provide for his family, 5 kids and a wife. So, he needed to make more money. That was kind of the through line. He needed more money here. So basically he was unable, Bischoff didn't want to give it to him because he couldn't, do it. And apparently this is where they hatched the plan where Pillman would become a loose cannon, where he would go off script. Now, there's two stories going on here. One of them is Pillman did this all by himself without Bischoff even knowing this. And then Bischoff tells his part of the story where he's like, no, I knew what was going on. Cornette on his podcast say, well, Bischoff is just not wanting to admit he got played.
Yeah, right. Of course.
But who knows? I mean, Bischoff saying one thing, everyone else is kind of saying the other thing. So who knows what's truth or not?
Part of me wants to think there's some truth in both, in what both said, because Pillman was trying to use Bischoff, but then in order to get Bischoff to kind of agree to it, he's kind of saying that he kind of lets him in on the gimmick. He kind of lets him in on the gimmick, like, hey, I'm gonna pretend to be crazy, huh?
Maybe not with everything, but I mean, I would think he would know some of the stuff, like, hey, I'm gonna do this. So,
right.
All right, so we'll talk about here. Basically, the lines are blurred on what was staged and what was real. This was in order to get WWE's attention, so he could get a bidding war between Eric Bischoff and Vince McMahon to see who he could get more money out of, basically. So, I mean, it says here, I'm reading, by the way, from thesportster.com. So this is all their kind of transcription here of the episode. It's good stuff here. Pillman at one point convinces Bischoff to fire him. Literally fire him. Give him an actual pink slip to get out of his contract. Which, again, this is where Bischoff says, no, he knew what he was doing. Everyone else is saying, no, he played Bischoff. Like, he got out of his contract. And so that way he can take the letter of termination to WWE and show him, like, hey, I'm a free agent. So in that way the bidding war can start. Pillman does make some appearances. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just to stop you right there real quick. I mean, that's why it just kind of got weird. Like, it got weird right there because, because he ends up in ECW. Like, so it's like, I don't know. It got kind of weird because I'm like, wait a minute. The whole point was get to WWE, but he's in ECW. I mean, I guess it's no different than anything Austin did. You kind of almost make a stop at ECW in between. I don't know. It was just kind of interesting that ECW then gets looped into the whole thing,
I don't think he was trying to get to WWE because I mean I think at one point someone says he preferred WCW.
Oh, right.
I think he just wanted more money, and whatever the highest bidder was, he was going to go. So, and we'll talk about the contract.
Well, I think real quick again though, to your point, I think that is a good point that you mentioned it because I think that was kind of part of what Pillman was trying to do to show, like, I could show up anywhere. Like, I could show up in all three promotions in a month. Like, I mean, if everyone agrees to bring him in, but it's like that part of the whole thing was he can show up anywhere. And obviously ECW is just one of those places at the time he was able to show up at. So yeah, that's a good point now that you mention it.
So, I mean, we'll mention some of the things he did. In WCW, at one point, during a match, he went to go grab Bobby the Brain Heenan's neck, which he had just had surgery and he was very protective of. He got him to cuss live on TV and even walk out. Apparently that was not planned. And in another match he had with, I'm completely forgetting his name, Kevin Sullivan, right? Yes, Sullivan.
Mm-hmm. The Booker Man.
Booker Man. He called him the Booker Man, which at that point no one knew what that was. Kind of obviously Sullivan was the one that was writing television basically, or booking the matches, and so breaking the fourth wall there. In ECW, I think at one point when he showed up, he was gonna like urinate in the ring. I think he put a baby and a woman in front of him to bodyguard him from people. So he did some crazy stuff for sure. Some stuff that probably wouldn't be okay to do in this, day and age. And you're right, Rob, as you put in this chat here that we're having. Heyman would work with injured people. He worked with Austin. I think Austin mentioned it. Austin was hurt. He had a voice. He could talk, right? Same thing with Pillman. He wasn't. I don't know. Did he have matches? I don't remember if he did in ECW, but
I don't even remember if he did.
He for sure had promos. I mean, he had great promo skills, phenomenal promo skills. So unfortunately, during the loose cannon gimmick, he bought an $80,000 vehicle. I forget which was it, like a Jeep or something.
Yeah, it was like a Jeep
and
truck deal.
He had a serious car accident when he fell asleep at the wheel. I guess due to some, I believe Melanie said it was like muscle relaxers or something, but who knows what it was. Yeah. Some new prescriptions that he was taking that caused him to fall asleep at the wheel. Luckily, none of the kids were inside the vehicle with him. But this basically was kind of it was basically the focal point of the entire story of what led to his downfall. In the wrestling business as well as life. Basically, he needed metal plates in his face. They had to reconstruct his whole face. His sister said they needed 400 doctors for every part of his nose, his forehead. His ankle was shattered.
I think they peeled his face back or whatever, right?
Yeah,
or they peeled his scalp back. And I don't know. But just to see, he looked exactly the same. Like, how clean of a
great job
of a surgery. Like, you almost, how they said they almost didn't believe it. They just thought the car accident, when everyone heard about it and that him being injured, they all just thought it was another Pillman stunt. Like, if you just look at his face, you would just say this was totally stunt. They did how many surgeries or what? And it's just it doesn't show. So I don't know. There's no scar or anything.
People thought he was going to show up in WWF at the time as evil Shawn Michaels swing, because he was having plastic surgery on his face. That's how crazy things got, apparently, I guess, which was great. He obviously had, he had little, were they nails sticking out of the side of his leg?
Bolts, I think.
Right?
He said, yeah.
Because that was really bad. They basically had to put his leg in a standing or walking position because it was that bad, and he never really fully recovered from that because he didn't give himself time. He played down his injuries, and eventually WWE signed him. I don't think was knowing too much of the extent of the injuries.
Yeah. Too, if that press conference that they show, didn't they say, doesn't Pillman say, the last 8 weeks of my life, have really changed my life? So all this happened in 8 weeks. That's, I guess they didn't do physicals back then or what, before someone came in the door, signed a contract, but
different time.
Different time for sure.
So we talk about obviously the famous, the moment on Monday Night Raw where they show a gun on live TV here. They pass Austin and Pillman cross paths right away, and they put them together. Pillman's not really wrestling at this point. He's just kind of, going back and forth with Austin, and they show the incident of Austin breaking into the house. Someone we forgot to mention, JR, is also featured here. And he talks about the whole situation. Wasn't the best idea because they had to apologize the next night or the next week or whatever. But apparently it did draw a lot of ratings at the time. So, it got people talking. Of course, back then, we'll talk about the ratings because there was something probably even more disgusting for ratings that happened later on in the show here. But we'll quickly wrap up this part here. Let's see. Pillman wrestled, but the amount of pain he was in, he was, using a lot of painkillers. At one point, Jim Ross tried to convince him that, he could be a commentator. And Pillman thought that was a whole step down. He didn't want to be a commentator. He wanted to be a wrestler. but yeah, it wasn't. I mean, his matches weren't very good. He tried his best, but obviously he was still hurting from his ankle. Um, and we're running a little bit low on time here. So, any last minute things about this segment before we get into the aftermath?
It was just interesting to kind of look back and really realize that, because I couldn't really tell you too many Pillman matches. So I think it helped explain to me exactly why, like because the injuries and because he really just couldn't go, that there, as far as why he really was, like, I do kind of remember some interaction with Goldust and Pillman. I remember a little bit of the Austin attacking Pillman. I kind of remember that. But yeah, like I don't really remember a whole lot of Pillman doing anything other than that gun segment, other than maybe some interaction with the Heart Foundation and stuff. Outside of that, I don't remember a whole lot. I don't remember any matches, and that helped me explain. It helped explain why. And at the time, like I said, I remember him from WWE, so I didn't really have an understanding of how good of a worker and how good of a wrestler he was. I just thought that was just crazy Pillman. I don't know. He made the most of the situation considering what it was, and it was just crazy to see, like, or to think, considering the work he had done in the past and the way the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars went, how big of a star he could have been, and how how that could have impacted a lot of different people's career, again, including his own, and being in that mix with Brock and Austin and The Undertaker and so forth. So just interesting how it kind of played out.
When we return, we will wrap up this kind of run through of the Dark Side documentary here, and then we'll talk a little bit of NXT news that happened and whatever else we can come up with right here on Beyond the Ropes. But until then, just follow us on Twitter, right, at RealBTR Radio. Follow me at EthanME95. Follow James at
JHW Reporter.
Follow Rob at
Rob Flores Media.
And of course, Facebook.com/Beyond the Ropes. You'll find episodes, predictions, so on and so forth. And of course, YouTube, just search up Beyond the Ropes. But we'll be right back with more of the dark side of the ring and dark side of the Brian Pillman family. We are 22S Radio. 22S Radio is 22smedia.com and 88.1 FM, KKJZ HD3, Long Beach, Los Angeles. Almost lost it there, guys, but we're good. Welcome back to episode 142 of Beyond the Ropes. Of course, I'm your host, Ethan, joined alongside the analyst, James, and of course, producer, Rob Flores. Let's talk more. Let's wrap up this dark side of the ring. It's been a dark episode. Got to end it with some light stuff, but unfortunately, I got to quickly go through this here. So Jim Cornette obviously featured on the episode. He's always great telling these stories, but Pillman was slated to be at Bad Blood 1997, but he never showed. Jim Cornette at the time, working for WWE, called the hotel where Pillman had been staying, only to be informed that the wrestler had passed away. And at the time, the ambulance and police were there. And you can tell even now, Cornette was still kind of devastated with the loss. He was good friends with Pillman. And at that time, he couldn't even tell Bruce Pritchard at the time, what was going on. He told a production assistant to go get Bruce, and he handed him the phone and left. So it was very unfortunate. The next night, McMahon announced Pillman's death to the world on Monday Night Raw, which led to a controversial segment with Melanie being interviewed by Vince.
I kind of remember this too. Like, it was weird, and because right before you even mentioned the Melanie thing, which I had kind of forgotten about, this was like one of the first wrestling deaths I think I can remember, at least for like someone, an active wrestler. I mean, it hasn't happened too many times. Mm-hmm. But before Benoit, before Guerrero, this was kind of like that first one, obviously before like Owen and stuff. So I mean, I guess at the time you don't realize, like, they bring family members on there, and they, like, it was weird that, like, they like it was weird. Vince was like kind of covering his own self, I guess you can say, because Melanie says, don't mention anything about the drugs or the drug rumors or prescription drugs. And of course, the first thing he says was that. And it was interesting how she kind of mentions like, oh yeah, like she made a face. And like, I probably wouldn't have even like really picked up on it unless she said it the way she did and was like, I told him not to say it and not to ask me that. He asked me that. And so she made this face like, really, bro? So like, that was a like good little insight there. But it was weird though too and I think there's some controversy against her. I don't know, maybe you could say if Cornette has said anything, but it was kind of like, maybe now it was like a money grab on her end too. Like, yeah, put me on camera because that's tough. Like why else? Like, I mean, it's not like she wasn't devastated, but man, like if I lost somebody, I'd need at least a week or a month before I can really like get on any sort of camera to talk about my loved one who just passed away or something, you know? So
Absolutely.
I don't know. Everybody's different. So
so that happened, and then we don't hear from the Pillmans in the wrestling business for quite some time. We do get some aftermath with the family. They got to say goodbye at the funeral. Vince and JR were the only two there, I believe, from WWE that actually appeared there at the funeral. Melanie goes on to remarry a guy, yeah, and he basically, he basically treats the kids like trash. I believe Danny's mother Danny goes to live with her mother, basically, so she's not really involved there. And then, yeah, I believe Brittany's still there. Obviously, I don't think she didn't have any other family. But Linda,
right, which is unfortunate for her because she's stuck. Like, I mean, she's stuck in the middle of all that. You know what I mean?
But yeah, so I mean, yeah, some horror stories about Pillman's. Their stepfather kind of destroying the GameCube and training dogs to basically threaten Brian Jr. It's terrible. It's terrible stuff. But then we hear again someone who comes off as a saint here, and everyone considers her a saint. Brian's sister Linda makes sure all the kids are at least seeing each other once a month since Brian's passing. And we see, I mean, she was obviously interviewed. She has a house with all three of them, welcome there. And they have B-roll of them currently just hanging out, and it's nice footage. There was a funny moment with Brian Jr. I guess she was being interviewed and Brian Jr.'s upstairs, and there was a spider in the bathroom, and he's deathly afraid of spiders, and she just kind of laughs. She's like, I saw it earlier and I forgot to tell.
It's like he's this big old dude and he's scared of spiders.
Look, we all have our fears.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm scared of spiders too. So.
I don't like spiders, but it goes into Brian in recent years getting a phone call from Steve Austin saying, hey, there's I have a weight belt of your dad. I'm going to send it over. And he considers that a sign to get involved in the business. And they go into a little bit of his early career, including some shots from AEW. So overall, a very solid episode. I think everyone really liked it. Linda got her own T-shirt out of it for Mother's Day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she got. So there's a Brian Pillman T-shirt, an old T-shirt that they re-released on Pro Wrestling Tees, but then there's now one with Linda's face on it. So
go ahead, Linda.
So I mean, I've considered getting it. It's kind of cool. But I mean,
I didn't know that.
She seems like a great person, and luckily those kids, I mean, have turned out okay. By the looks of it, I mean,
yeah, all things considered, yeah.
All things considered, Melanie wants a relationship with them. She currently only has one with Brian Jr., I believe. He's kind of forgiven her just because, he doesn't have another parental figure other than Linda, of course, but he doesn't want to be angry at his mother for the rest of his life. But
and honestly, I mean, she Pillman Jr. is the only one that's biologically related to her. So, but I mean, so yeah, it's. But I think, at the end, like you said, like Linda, she's really been the one, like even to the, they had it for that episode. Who knows if that's how common that is for them nowadays. But to see them all at the table and kind of looking back at memories of their father and stuff, I thought that's kind of neat. And to see them all still kind of be together and support each other and interact with everything that gone on. And there's so many different ways in which they could have lost contact at any point. Throughout that. So
absolutely
says a lot.
Great episode. I don't believe he ever held the title in WWE. Again, his wrestling career really wasn't, at that point, he really wasn't doing much wrestling wise. But we go from one iconic figure in the WWE and WCW, ECW to another iconic figure in our tribal chief, Roman Reigns. Come on.
Yeah.
Are you ready to acknowledge Roman Reigns as the head of the table, James?
No. What did he do special this time? What am I supposed to acknowledge him for? What is he doing for me?
He brought back Jimmy Uso. You see, you're acting like Jimmy Uso right now. Because he brought him back. He brought him back into the picture after being out for several months.
Yeah, but now what is this gonna do for main event Jay?
So look. He was going to bring him back to help elevate him to main event Jay's level. Main event Jay is on the right side. It's like right now, I'm like Roman Reigns. Rob is like main event Jay because, he's going to side with me. If I tell him to do something, he's going to do it.
Okay.
You're acting like Jimmy Uso right now, who is being very defiant, who's not following the line, James.
I just think it's only a matter of time before they make him tag team again, and then they just
hopefully. Because
no, not really.
What do you mean? They could all carry the gold.
We don't want main event Jay to just be lumped back in.
They've established him as the top star already.
And then the minute they win the tag team titles again, it will no longer matter.
Seth Rollins went. We'll talk about Seth Rollins. Fantastic. Seth Rollins, went from being a WWE champion to being a tag team champion. Nothing wrong with that.
Look, you want to talk about returns? I mentioned them earlier. The big return from Mr. Jinder Mahal. Talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about the big return from Bobby Fish.
Hold on. Let's go back to Jinder real quick. Is
Lord.
it just me? Or do those Singh brothers, whatever they're called, aren't they a lot bigger now? They really bulked up quite a bit.
I think they might need to be tested.
They something. They look big.
I'm scared, James. I'm scared.
Because you don't know what's going to happen with Bobby Fish?
No, because I feel they're going to push Jinder Mahal again.
I mean, considering how far down he's fallen, any victory is a push at this point. So he's got his push as of this last week. I don't even remember who he fought or wrestled.
Lord, you were already forgetting poor Jeff Hardy.
Yeah. Speaking of Jeff, I saw something that I think his contract's coming out. So maybe there's no coincidence there.
I thought he signed last year for like a 3-year deal or something.
Maybe. I saw something about his time maybe coming up. Who knows? He's kind of at the point in his career now where he's just kind of putting guys over and whatnot, but can still kind of, whenever they do an elimination chamber, he can be a high spot guy in there. But,
we'll see. Yeah. We'll see for sure. There was a nice little interaction for the first time in months between Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, going back to that.
Mm-hmm.
So Seth and Cesaro were having a match, and of course Jimmy Uso, the other Uso, as I'm going to refer to him as until he gets in line and falls in line. But Jimmy Uso cost Seth Rollins a match, which gave Cesaro the opportunity to face Roman Reigns at the most recent pay-per-view, WrestleMania Backlash, which we'll talk about next episode. Of course, Seth went to Roman, and they had a little discussion, obviously a little back and forth, and it was nice to see them. This was the first time interacting with their new gimmicks here, I guess, if you want to say that. I mean, potentially planting seeds for a potential future match down the line. So,
do we want to see that now, especially like in the middle of the year? I mean,
sure. SummerSlam's coming up.
okay, yeah, you could do that at SummerSlam or something like that. That's cool.
Yeah,
I can find.
Got a few
But
months.
then, but aren't they both kind of healed? Like, what are we getting at there? Who's doing what?
That's a good question. They could always turn Seth back.
They would have to. I mean,
because Roman's not changing. He's
not anytime soon.
He can't be going back and forth here.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, Seth. I don't know what else there is for Seth to do. He's kind of been heel for over a year now. He's been doing his thing. Great work. But I mean, yeah, I could see a face turn for him.
It's just not the greatest like babyface promo though.
But he's a good face. He's a good face. People like him when he's face.
Yeah.
Look, he and Roman could do great work together.
Oh, of course. I'm not down that at all. I think they definitely could.
I think it could be really good. Who else haven't I mentioned? Adam Cole. Adam Cole is fantastic. Kyle O'Reilly.
You just want to say he's fantastic. You have no news on Adam Cole. You just want to say he's fantastic.
Well, I have to get it in every week. Make sure I have to remind you, because you seem to forget. You know who else I haven't mentioned?
Who didn't you mention?
Say his name.
Cool,
say his name.
Kyle.
Say his name. Say it with me.
No.
L.A.
I didn't even remember who you're talking about.
Oh my goodness. Well, speaking of NXT superstar L.A. Knight, let's talk about the big news that broke. It's already old news by the time this airs, but it broke earlier today. As first reported by Barstool Sports Wrestling Podcast, Brandon Walker's interview with Johnny Gargano, the Black and Gold brand will present NXT TakeOver in Your House 2021 on Sunday, June 13th at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, streaming exclusively on Peacock in the US and on the WWE Network elsewhere. Former WWE announcer Todd Pettengill, who is synonymous with the iconic In Your House brand, will return to host the festivities. So that's the kind of stuff.
Look, they need to do something. I think maybe calling Todd Pettengill in might be enough to boost some sort of a rating because the ratings aren't doing very good. The May 11th show, only 697,000. So I think you get a guy, superstar like Todd Pettengill in the mix there, then I think you're really going to boost the ratings. Maybe they get into the 800s.
To be fair, Adam Cole was not on our TV last night. I haven't seen the episode, so I don't know if LA Knight was on there either. So, they might be correlating there. But another In Your House, the last event was fun. Of course, we got to see the start of the reign of Io Shirai as champion there on that show. Got to see a performance from Code Orange opening up the show. It was kind of right in the early stages of the pandemic, so
yeah.
It's crazy. It's been a year. So
yeah, it has.
Of course, as you mentioned, it's going to be a Peacock, and I love the Peacock. James, do you love Peacock?
Yeah, I have the app and stuff. It's been good. Like I said, I haven't really been watching a whole lot of WWE stuff. Actually, I signed it up on my dad's TV. He has that Roku device, which actually again has been really good because I don't have to use an HDMI cord and all this other stuff to hook it up for my computer. So Peacock app has been great for wrestling content in that regard. But normally, like during the week, I'm kind of not watching wrestling content. There's a lot of other good stuff on there. So if you need a reason outside of wrestling or another reason aside from wrestling to kind of get you over the hurdle of buying Peacock, I think there's a lot of good options on there. I think The Office and I've been watching Snaps. It's like a bunch of crazy murder, like real life murder shows.
Interesting.
Yep.
Getting back to NXT, we are going to have NXT Championship being defended on TV. So you speaking of ratings, just remember that it will be next week. Finn Balor getting his rematch against Karrion Kross for the NXT title. So that should be a good one for sure.
They better do something to get the ratings up.
Speaking of ratings, who was number one? Go ahead. Who was number one in the I mean, they're saying number one in all of TV, but it
They
was
said
really
number one in cable for AEW. It was just a little over 1 million. So
it was
you know,
a demo. It was a demo, but
it better have been the demo because I mean I don't know what else it could have been. That was Brian Alvarez who's he worked for PW Insider with Meltzer.
well, we know who they prefer anyway. So
I mean, but I just there's no way they were number one cable show in the country, whatever. And if so, what exactly were they number one in? So I don't know. I'm kind of confused as to what really happened there.
Let's talk about the biggest moment.
They were number one in something.
The biggest moment they had that led them to number one. Of course, I'm talking about blood and guts, but perhaps the biggest moment in history when you see Chris Jericho pulling out that razor blade from his wrist tape there and just carrying it around, showing off to the camera and everything.
Was he really? I didn't know. I didn't see that. That wasn't even on like Twitter or anything. I don't think.
He wasn't showing it off like that, but
it wasn't. But it was obvious though.
It was obvious. Cornette called. Basically, so I'm gonna go with Cornette real quick. I listened to I haven't seen it yet, but I listened to his podcast. I like listening to the reviews of the matches and everything. He liked the match, which is basically a War Games match, up until Jericho showed up because he was the last person there, and it got very slow. The pace changed according to him, and they did a whole bunch of stuff they didn't need to do, including obviously Jericho blading. I mean, Cornette's always been one for blading, but it was obvious Jericho had something on him. And then the spot at the end where he got pushed, he hated the finish, where they basically pushed him off the cage and he fell into a crash pad. He did a little segment on the crash pad. I think he did a little sponsorship for my crash pad.
I did see that notification from Cornette about something about a crash pad or something. So I'll have to go back and watch that as well. Yeah, no, that's interesting though, because I did see something where they're like, oh yeah, like AEW is more likely to be forgiven for mistakes or different things like that as compared to someone like WWE, which makes sense. But yeah, showing off or having a razor blade easily displayed like that, obviously you use for blading and for bleeding during matches and stuff. And then the good old crash pad spot. I don't know. That might be too many. I can see why Cornette was a little frustrated with the way that match took place.
That fell apart. What was it? The whole time bomb thing a couple months back.
Yeah.
Fell apart. Right. That was
the ring exploding deal.
Yeah, that whole thing. So anyways, they had a nice rating for that week, but we'll see if they can keep it up. Next week's episode, we're talking about WrestleMania Backlash. We're gonna, they had some matches.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully they're good. Well, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it there. We'll give a review. But until next time, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at EthanW95. You can follow James at
JHW Reporter.
You can follow Rob at
Rob Flores Media. And
of course, at Real BTR Radio. But until next time, this episode has been absolutely, throw it up, too sweet.